This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tank Girl, Miriam Joie.
Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Wednesday, October 23rd, 2019, and my guest is Nick Gray of Phandroid. Hi, Nick. How are you?
I am doing excellent. Yourself?
I'm great. We have to talk about Pixel today.
Do we have to?
Well, yes.
I mean, it is the smartphone that everybody's clamoring to talk about these days.
We have to talk about it because we have a lot to say. Because last week we talked about the Pixel 4 on the podcast with Daniel Bader, and I don't think we got it all out of our systems. At least I didn't. And I know that you and I collaborated quite a bit at the event since you lent me your tripod and stuff. And we both had a lot to say about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's great and horrible at the same time.
It's kind of like, yes, absolutely. Let me actually go back to this thought that I keep reintroducing into the show that you probably know about as well, is that I always feel like my Pixel relationship, because I use Pixels pretty much as daily drivers, and before that use Nexi as daily drivers for years, is a broken relationship, like Stockholm Syndrome. My captors treat me well, so I am going to stick around, because honestly, the Pixel 4 exemplifies this for me more than ever. I am madly in love with the camera. It is blowing my mind the more I dig into it. And at the same time, I am absolutely and utterly frustrated with the hardware and the selection and the choices they made. And also, feeling that other people feel the same way. And also, seeing that there's issues that are true issues that are being reported that we're going to cover, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of good about this device, but Google did drop the ball in a couple specific areas, and some of them shouldn't even be an issue at all, mainly related to software.
I agree. So I don't know how we should do this. I want to spend about probably a half hour, 40 minutes on this, and then spend 20 minutes or so on other stuff, because there is a lot of exciting other stuff today. Like OnePlus announced that the 70 Pro, which we thought wasn't coming to the US, is coming to the US with T-Mo. And not only that, but we thought that phone wasn't going to have a 5G version, and it's coming with 5G to T-Mo. Mind blown. So we'll talk about that. But do you want to start with, I don't know, the design?
Yeah, I mean, we could start with the hardware externally, because I think the hardware externally is very interesting and probably one of...
It's the best one yet, I think.
My favorite Pixel device to date. I mean, yeah. In my review, I clearly stated this phone can be perceived as ugly as hell, but I love it anyways. And I don't know why. I think it's that simplistic design, especially with the matte finishes on the Oh-So Orange and Clearly White, because you have to get those names right. That matte finish on the glass makes it feel like something we haven't felt in a long time since polycarbonate phones were the thing.
I agree. I actually feel like, for me, again, it's this good and bad. It's this duality that the Pixel 4 brings for pretty much everything. I love the back of the phone. I love the side of the phone. I love the phone with the screen turned off. I just love the design. It reminds me of HTC Desire phones, like the Desire I back in the day, or the Desire 816, which I thought was such a great phone when it came out. The 816 was like one of my favorite phones at the time it came out. And at the same time, as soon as you turn on that screen, it is ugly as sin, not because the screen is bad. The screen is amazing. It's because of that horrible forehead and the disproportion, that unbalanced design that the Pixel 2 nailed, and then the Pixel 3, 2 and 3. I shouldn't say the small 2, but the 2XL, and then the 3, and then not the 3XL because of the bathtub at the top. But I feel like some Pixels have nailed that symmetry, and the symmetry is killing me. It's killing me. I don't know, Nick, I can't deal.
Compared to the Pixel 3, which had amazing symmetry, not the XL, because that notch was out of control, let's be honest. But yeah, I mean, the Pixel 3 really nailed it with the front-facing speakers on both sides and the even bezels on the top and the bottom. And this, honestly, for me, it doesn't look ugly from the front. It just looks lopsided. And the second I start using the phone instead of just looking at
it goes away.
I completely forget about it. And honestly, though, I would rather have a lopsided front and top bezel versus a notch, even if it's a teardrop notch or, a hole in the display.
Yeah.
Because when you start watching content on the display, especially videos, and then even playing games, not having anything interrupt your screen is more important than how big your bezels are at the top and the bottom.
I agree, but it still bothers me because it's 2019, and
yes,
here are the 4 phones in my pocket. This on this little 2-3 day trip that I'm taking, basically home for 2 days. I have the Pixel 3 XL in my main pocket because I still haven't gotten rid of it, because we'll talk about why in a minute. The Pixel 4 in my other pocket, and then the side pockets, my cargo pockets, have a Note 10 Plus and a OnePlus 7T, right? Good choices, huh? But here's the thing. I use the Note for 5 minutes and I'm like, this is the future. Like, it doesn't matter if you have the Note 10 or the 10 Plus. It's just mostly
they're the same thing.
Yeah, it's a matter of like how big your hands are and how much real estate you want. But that just looks like the future. I had people double take me in line while I was waiting to board my flight today. And I'm like, it's a freaking Note, folks. You've seen it. It's like not rocket science, but they were blown away by the thing. And you don't get that with a Pixel 4. It's just like boring,
Yeah. Well, and that's what I said in my Note review. I mean, in my Note review, I clearly said, it's like a phone that you see in sci-fi movies, the phone of the future. And
it's
that's
amazing.
the look that the Note gives you. And yeah, the Pixel 4 gives you none of that. But to be fair to Google, that's looks and aesthetic, and that doesn't change the functionality of the phone, really. And
no.
We all know that Google's about the experience rather than looks.
Yeah, I agree.
And they've sacrificed a lot of other things as well, simply for the experience, because they're simply saying hardware really doesn't matter. It's what the software has to offer. That's not forgivable, but that's what they say.
And there's a lot of things. This is going to be a pattern we're going to be repeating throughout this podcast, where it's not excusable. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I feel that I'm not asking for Google to be leading and bleeding edge, okay? I'm not asking for Google to be Galaxy Note 10, right? Sci-fi phone. But I'm asking for it to be attractive, and the back, they nailed it. The sides with that anodized aluminum without antenna bands, they nailed it.
You don't see the antenna bands. It's amazing.
So good. And then they totally screw up the front. And even if it was symmetric, the bezels are huge. And I'm not talking about top and bottom. I'm talking about the side bezels. I'm like, this is a phone from 2017.
I'm fine with this. I mean, the side bezels are smaller than an iPhone side bezels, though.
Like which one? The 11 or the 11 Pro?
Like the new one, the 11 Pro.
Oh, really? Well, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, the iPhones are a little bit thicker
Again,
on
I'm
the sides,
thinking Note
but
here.
I think we need to touch on the base of why that bezel is so big at the top, because it's not there for no reason at all.
Right.
I mean, the justification of some of the things that are up there might not be the best, but so for those who don't know, the top bezel is ridiculously large because they have multiple cameras up front with an infrared sensor, an infrared camera, front-facing camera, sensors for the solely radar, which allows for gesture recognition, and you get secure face unlock with all of that, kind of like what the iPhone has. So it's essentially what the iPhone has plus a radar sensor, and they just decided not to give it that tiny little, cat ear cutouts like the iPhone has for its notch.
Yeah.
That's what I call the iPhone cutouts. But I mean, they probably could have done an iPhone, cutout for that top notch, but then they would have been told, hey, you're copying everything the iPhone's doing, especially with that square camera module on the back.
That would have been top notch. Sorry.
No.
Oh, dad joke. Okay, so now look, seriously though, I don't want to get in solely just yet. I want to get the basics. So we've talked about the design. I think we got the design down, right? We can move on to maybe the display?
Yeah, the display. I mean, between these two devices, you have two different sizes. One's a full HD plus and the other is quad HD plus. Pretty much what we had last year. The sizes of those displays are slightly bigger.
Is it a different aspect ratio than last year?
I think it's just
It's
slight
19
tad
to
taller.
9, right? No, it's 19 and a half to 9. It's 19 to 9.
19 to 9, yeah.
It feels narrower to me. Like when I put it side by side with my Pixel 3 XL, it feels like the Pixel 4 XL is narrower. And yet...
Let me see. I've got my Pixel 3 right here versus the Pixel 4.
So let's have a look at... GSM Arena is going to save us.
They honestly, the bodies of these phones are pretty much identical.
Let me look at the display aspect ratio, because I think it might be taller, and that's why they made it narrower, which makes perfect sense.
It's actually a little bit wider than the Pixel 3 for the little one.
No, but the 4XL versus 3XL. So it's 19 to 9 aspect ratio, and I'm looking up the Pixel 3XL specs now, because that's kind of bothering me. I'm wondering now, why is it narrower? It really is narrower. So I don't care about the small one because I don't have it. So resolution 1440 by 3040. That's the 19.9 aspect ratio. That's the 4XL. And the 3XL is 1440 by 2960. Less tall. 18.5 by 9 aspect ratio. So there you have it.
So yeah, just slightly taller.
Now in terms of width, the dimensions are 76.7 for the 3XL. That's millimeters, and 75.1, yeah, I'm correct, it's narrower for the 4XL. And narrower phones are awesome. If you've used the OnePlus 7T, you know.
That phone is amazing.
That's 20 to 9, right? So that's like full on, almost all display. It's great.
Or the new Xperia devices.
Oh yeah, well that's 21 to 9.
21 to 9, yeah. It takes it to a whole new level.
It's amazing. All right, so the display to me is incredibly good. It's one of the best displays, short of like going for Note 10. My only negative about this display is twofold. Number one, it's not bright enough yet again. It's slightly brighter than its 3XL, but not bright enough. Secondly, it's also HDR and all that good stuff, but there was HDR last year. The second thing, and there's a whole news brouhaha going on about this, and I want to hear your take, is it's a 90 hertz display from time to time.
From time to time, yeah. So for those who don't know, it's a 90 hertz display, so it's capable of 90 frames per second. And the standard setting is to have it at 60 frames per second. When you buy the phone and turn it on, you then go into settings and you can turn on variable refresh rate, which will take it up to 90 at certain instances. And then we've just found out it really only kicks in when brightness is above 75%?
Nobody runs their Pixel 4 XL at more than 50. I've got it at maybe 55, 60% brightness all the time.
Yeah, I never go above 50 unless I'm outside. But I think it does kick in certain instances. Like, so if you have a game that is running or can run at 90 frames per second, it will kick in and go into overdrive.
Or if you scroll really fast.
Or if you're scrolling a website or doing something like that, it kicks in, or your Twitter feed or Instagram, things like that. Honestly, I don't have any issues with it making those switches back and forth, because this past week using the phone, I have noticed the phone looks amazing when you're going through content, you're scrolling your feed, and when you're doing that, that's when it's switching. And then honestly, what else do I need 90 frames per second for when it's displaying something that's not moving on the display? Because the OnePlus 7 Pro does it. Every other device should do it. Because honestly, that's a waste of battery life.
Yes, but I don't agree with you.
Say what you feel.
Well, here's my issue. Okay, look, it's advertised as a 90 hertz display. I want 90 hertz. Now, I understand that if nothing's moving, you can set it down to 60. I'm fine with that. But right now, that's not what they're doing. I'm constantly noticing the switch between 60 and 90, and it's a pain. It doesn't happen consistently. It's visible. So you see the tearing when you scroll because it hasn't switched over to 90. It's a freaking disaster. It's terrible, terrible, terrible. It's so bad that I went in developer options and I pegged it to 90 hertz. And guess what? Oh, it's amazing. It's so much better. It is so freaking amazing. It is just like using the OnePlus 7T. It is incredible. It is just wow. Like, try it. The difference is night and day. It's such a mess right now, the way they've got it implemented. It's a complete disaster and nightmare. I wish they'd just stuck with a 60 hertz display, because of the next thing we're going to talk about, which is battery life. But if they're going to go 90, just do not, at $799 entry price with 64 gigs of RAM, do not mess with me, Google. I want my 90 hertz all the time.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that was very confusing. They have the variable refresh rate under display settings, and then you have to go into, first off, enable developer settings by, going in and tapping the build number. What is it?
8 times?
8 times? Who knows?
Whatever
they change it from device to device. And then you have to dig through 1,001 developer settings to find the force 90. It's ridiculous. They should have had, if you're going to do this and you're going to have the option in there in order to switch over to forcing 90 frames per second, put it under display settings. I know people are going to complain. As we said, we're going to get to battery life. They're going to complain about that because it will suck your battery more. But give people the option.
Honestly, I'm not noticing a huge difference. It's there. It's a difference.
How many days have you had it at force 90?
Most of the time. And the big difference, I would say you lose about 5 to 10% battery life on a normal charge. It's a lot, right? But
that's a lot. And that's the XL. Imagine that on the Baby Pixel, which I'm using, and the Baby Pixel would. But
we're not at battery life yet. So this is going to be the dumpster fire that's coming. I'm warning you right now. Bring your fire suits and your fire extinguishers, because the fire is real. But the point is that at that point, I don't care. This is my thing, Nick. I would rather have 90 hertz pegged on all the time. If they can't do it right and do it so that it's 90 the moment there's motion and not 90 when you're still, then just forget it. I'm willing to sacrifice that battery life because I have seen the future. And the future is what OnePlus has brought us, where it doesn't affect battery life. Well, it does, but it doesn't affect it enough that you care, right? So somebody can do it right. Google needs to do it right.
Yeah.
So they said there's a fix coming, right?
Yeah, they say a fix is coming, but like everything else, you don't know how long we will have to wait and what that fix will actually do and what the experience is going to be afterwards. So at this point, I mean, technically the phone is still not launched yet, right? When's the official retail launch date?
I have no idea. That's a good question.
We should know that,
This is because
right?
we don't care, because we already have the phone.
We have the device already. We've had the device for a week, but it's coming within the next
I'm Googling
week.
it. I'm Googling it.
we should be fired right now.
I know. Launch date.
Retail
We're
launch.
terrible people. Oh my God, we're bad. 24th of October.
That's tomorrow.
Pre-order 15th of October and launch 24th, I think, maybe. Yeah, it says 24th everywhere. So 24th.
So by the time this podcast is published, it's going to be available.
Correct. Hopefully you haven't pulled the trigger yet. You hear what we have to say first. Anyway, look, the thing about the 90 hertz is I'm nitpicking, I know. But here's the thing. It's like Samsung, right? That has on their phones Quad HD 2K displays on their flagships, like the S10 upper levels and the Note 10 upper levels. And then you look in the settings and by default it's set to 1080p. Now, I don't see the difference because I have bad eyes. Like, I don't see the resolution difference, but I see the frame rate difference. And so if you're going to give me a 90 hertz display, then run it at freaking 90 hertz, Google.
So my question is, I totally get that point. My question is, though, like, is this kind of like a Tesla ludicrous mode? If the vehicle can do these amazing things, but most people aren't going to do it, and you're not going to do it for the majority of the time. So let's tone things down and give you some crazy 90 hertz refresh rates when you might notice it. And maybe it just their implementation isn't perfect and it could get better, as you said. Would you compare it to that, or
I think
is this
you're
something?
Onto something. Yeah, I think. Look, I wouldn't call it that. I think there's a big difference in the sense that once you use a 90 hertz phone that has good performance to start with, and maybe we can segue into performance here, because performance on this phone is baller. Whether you run at 60 or 90 doesn't, makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the analogy for ludicrous comes in. And I want to comment on that in a sec. But I just can't I cannot finish this ludicrous thought comment on your thought without mentioning performance. This phone is finally the Google phone that runs very smoothly and very well. However, to really get that smoothness, for really feel like your touch response the lag is minimal on touch, you need to turn on 90 hertz all the time. And this is why OnePlus does it. Because OnePlus understands that you can't just optimize the software and have a fast processor. You really need that latency between what the display is doing and your finger is doing to be low. I wrote in my OnePlus 7T review on Geekspin that this is the first phone, the 7T, that kept up with my crazy Gmail usage, where I feel that every time I use Gmail on any Android phone, even the best Android phone, I always have moments in the UI where there's a slight pause and I have to kind of like slow down my thought process a little bit to wait for the UI to catch up with me. And I did not experience this on the OnePlus 7T. And here's the magic. When I turn on 90 hertz, force it, on the Pixel 4, it's the same. I do not wait for the UI. It is incredible, Nick. I don't know how to explain it. It shouldn't be related to the refresh rate, but it is.
Yeah, so I
as
noticed...
such, it is not ludicrous mode, because ludicrous mode is literally ludicrous. It's literally to do launches and prove that your car is fast. You don't use ludicrous mode in everyday life.
Well, so here's what I'm trying to get at, though. Like I've been trying to wrap my head around 90 hertz refresh rates since the 7 Pro came out, and whether or not it's something that we all need. Personally, for me, I do not see the difference. And this it's not to say that some people are just making it up, or, some people are blind and they can't see it. But honestly, everybody's eyes are a little bit different, and people perceive things a little bit differently. Like some people can't tell the difference between 24 frames per second for like a film and 60 frames per second. And then other people do notice the difference between 90 hertz and 120 hertz. And so it comes down to the individual user as far as what they can perceive. And for me, it's never been a huge issue. And honestly, like display resolution has never been a huge issue. I'm not blind by any means, but it's not something that for me, as my body can perceive, has ever been an issue. So for me, it's hard for me to justify, like say, oh, they didn't do it because of this. It's something that's a non-issue for me. So
I actually don't think it's related to the refresh rate. I'll tell you why. Because I feel the exact same way. This instant response, this complete low latency and fantastic performance when I use any iPhone that's a year or two or newer. Right?
And they don't have the 90 hertz.
And they have 60 hertz.
No,
so I think what it is, it's a latency and lag of the UI versus my finger. And it's amplified when it's running at 60 hertz on an Android phone for whatever reason. And it's amplified even further when it runs on the slower Android phone, which can't refresh at 90. It's refreshing the screen at 60, but the UI isn't running at 60. It's stuttering, right? So to me, it's why... What I'm saying is
a combination of a couple different variables.
Yeah, what is happening is on the OnePlus 7T and the Pixel 4 at 90 hertz, forced to 90 hertz, is that I think that the UI at some points refreshes faster than 60. And you feel it because it feels like your finger, the UI is following your finger in perfectly real time, kind of like the lag you get when you use a Apple Pencil versus a Surface Pen, There's a difference then. The Apple is just so much less latent, right? And I think that's why this thing is a deal. But I want to, maybe segue into this. I feel like this is a really fast, a really high performance phone. The big question is, will it remain that fast over time? Because typically Pixels slow down pretty drastically over time.
I saw a slowdown in my Pixel 2, but honestly,
my 3XL definitely slowed down.
I haven't noticed a slowdown in my Pixel 3, and I do keep it fairly clean. I haven't done a complete wipe in over 8 or 9 months. I did one, I think, right after Christmas last year, but honestly, I notice it significantly on the Pixel 2, but not so much on the Pixel 3. And of course, device to device, you can, and the applications that you have installed make a difference as well. But I agree with you 100%. This phone feels a lot more performant than other Pixel devices have in the past, even though it doesn't have the same amount of RAM and fast storage that other devices have this year.
And it doesn't have an 855 Plus.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, me
I
too.
think I think again, people forget to realize that 90% of the people who are going to buy the Pixel aren't crazy gamers, aren't going to be doing side by side comparisons with other devices to see, is this the fastest phone I can buy? Most people don't care about that. It's still important, but the average user doesn't give a crap.
I agree with you 100%. I actually don't think that I had any expectation this would be an 855 plus, and I'm perfectly happy with an 855. I am not perfectly happy with 6 gigs, only not because it's affecting performance. I'm actually noticing that it's really helping. It's no longer like my Pixel 3 XL shutting down apps in the background in a similar use case scenario. So they solved that problem, and I appreciate that, and I'm happy with 6 gigs. My issue with the fact that it's only 6 gigs is purely a value issue. I feel that, and we're going to talk about that value issue. It's the same with the 64 gigs of storage base. It's the same with the fact that it's no ultra wide. It's the same. It's basically the fact that this phone is lacking in terms of hardware compared to its contemporaries, even the iPhone. And it's priced at basically this ludicrous price for what it is. But we'll get to that. I just feel it's really fast, and I'm kudos to Google for finally giving us enough RAM to work. But here's the issue, right? The other issue is, in addition to the RAM, the fact that it's not competitive with RAM, is that in 2 or 3 years, if somebody keeps this phone this long, when it's at the end of its life, it will suffer from that 6 gigs of RAM, versus if it had 8 gigs, it probably would suffer slightly less, right? We know that's going to happen. So I don't understand when it's the same with the 64 gig and then they remove the free storage, right? It's like, It's like, Google, what the hell? Like, you're giving us, it's completely this, we said it was good and bad the whole time. The whole Pixel 4 thing is this push-pull of good and bad, because why do you put 6 gigs when you know the phone's going to last 3 years, up to 3 years in people's hands? And then why do you put 64 gigs when you don't offer free storage and there's no expansion?
So there's so many issues on so many levels with this. I mean, as you mentioned, the 6 gigabytes of RAM is more than passable today. Compared to the Pixel 3, it's a 50% boost over the 4 gigabytes that the Pixel 3 had. And honestly, unless you're putting something side by side and counting how many applications it can hold into memory before it starts dropping them, no one's going to know that this one has 6 versus 8 on another device.
Right.
But as you said, over time, that does make a difference. And Google's the only one who does this, promising 3 years of software updates, which means
Apple does too, pretty much, right? Isn't it 2 or 3
years? Within the Android space, because
right.
iOS is completely different. It's, the whole architecture thing. So, and they've always had less RAM than Android devices.
Well, they have 6 gigs on the iPhone 11 this year. So that's my point, right? It's like, if they put 6 gig on their super high-end, super efficient OS, then we should be getting 8 or 10 gigs on this Pixel.
Yeah. But so the RAM issue for me has always come down to, and for those who don't know, I've been doing smartphone speed tests for a while, opening up applications on both devices to see how they handle, how many apps they can hold into memory. And I did one with the 7T versus the 7 Pro. And the 7T beat out the 7 Pro, 8 gigabytes of RAM versus 12. It beat it out in RAM management.
Interesting.
Which
I think that might be an Android 10 thing.
Well, it could be an Android, but they were both running on Android 10.
Wait, the OnePlus 7 Pro has received Android 10 now?
It should have, yeah.
I should update mine.
like a long time ago.
Really?
I thought you should check for an update.
9. Okay, well, I have to look. Okay,
you should check for an update. No, but it comes down to software and how the software is optimizing for that memory, right?
Right.
And Google's saying, hey, we made Android, we should know how to optimize for that. But that being said, applications keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger and taking up more resources. So 2-3 years down the line, the experience that you get with 6 gigabytes of RAM isn't going to be anywhere as close as what it's going to be with 8 gigabytes of RAM. So not to say, hey, they should have made hardware to predict what's going to happen in 3 years, because most people are going to get rid of their device within 3 years. But they should give it some headroom.
Here's the thing that I want to talk about again, and we're going to talk about value later, but I want everybody to understand my position here is not that I have an issue with the lack of, the smaller amount of RAM that I'd like, the smaller amount of base storage that I'd like, and the lack of ultra wide camera, which are the three hardware things we cannot change. This is not the issue. It's the price that's the issue. Mm-hmm. This phone, if it was $599, you would just say, well, it's worse than the 7T at that price. Yes, but it's the Google experience. And then I'm willing to say, okay. But it's $799 for the small one. So no. Anyway, let's talk about battery life, because I'm looking at, we've been at it for half an hour. We still need to talk about the camera and the battery.
There's so much to talk about.
There's so much to talk about. The battery is a dumpster fire. I think it's terrible. Considering the battery is 3,700 milliamp hours versus 3,430 on the XL. Last year's XL was 3,430. And my battery life is slightly worse. Now, mind you, I've got pegged at 90 hertz. But even before I pegged it to 90 hertz, my battery life was slightly worse than my Pixel 3 XL with a more efficient processor. What is going on here?
I think solely for one.
Right. It's running all the time.
Solely for one, you got a radar sensor that's running all the time saying, hey, is anything moving around the phone? I mean, that's going to pull in some of the battery. And this week I'm actually going to experiment with turning solely off. I might turn it off, how things handle. I have the smaller Pixel. Well, I have both the Pixel 3
I was gonna say you have both,
Pixel 4 and the XL. I've been I love small devices, so I've been using the baby Pixel, and it will give me 12 to 13 hours between charges.
2,800 milliamp hours is ridiculous.
And honestly, that, it makes me sad. So this week I'm looking at software optimizations that can happen in order to extend that battery life. Well, you should turn off, since you don't 14. Notice it, you should turn off this 90 hertz 100% all the way. I did last night.
And turn off solely and see what happens. I don't know. Look, I again, this is another thing. At this price point, I expect no compromise on one of the pillars of owning a phone or making a phone today, which is battery life. Everyone to learn that lesson. Apple even went as far as removing 3D Touch to add a bigger battery this year and made the phones thicker. And they won because the iPhone battery life on the Pro is significantly better than it was on the XS last year. And so, where is Google in this? Are they on their own planet? Are they paying attention to what's going on out there?
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that, because they've been doing the research. They've been doing all the software work to make this phone incredible, even though they've missed the mark a little bit. But on the hardware side, I don't want to say I'm a spec junkie and want the best of the best all the time. But when the average phone comes with 37 to 4,000 milliamp hour batteries these days, right, you need to step up and meet the average. We're not, as you said before, we don't need a cutting edge, bleeding edge device with all the best hardware that money can buy. We need an average phone. And an average phone these days is run of the mill. Give me 4,000 milliamps, give me a large, full HD or quad HD display, give me 8 gigabytes of RAM. That's the average. And Google's shooting below average with the Pixel 4.
Yeah, it's just disappointing. It's like we've been telling them for 3 years now. This is the third review year of the 2, the 3, and the 4. Whether you pick the XL or not, in their own respective category, in their own respective size class, that they are lacking in battery life. Where the hell are you, Google? Are you listening? We're not saying this for amusement. We're saying it because it's a real problem for real users that we review phones for.
Yeah, I don't know what to say to that. I mean, it is what it is.
It's like they live in their own world, like Google, like Apple does. But Apple at least is listening somehow and delivering. I mean, the fact that Apple went for an ultra wide as the only other camera on their base phone shows that they're paying attention. But Google decided, this is my segue into the camera. Google decided that, hey, we're going to put a telephoto on there. Now, you're going to say, Miriam, don't be a hypocrite. You just posted on Instagram 8x zoom samples from the airplane you flew in today that show incredible performance on par with the P30 Pro. And it's true. But that's not the point. That's not what I wanted. That's not what users want. Users want all 3 cameras. Mm-hmm. And at that price point, absolutely should have all 3 cameras. When you can buy a phone for $200 less, the 7T, that has all 3 cameras. Now, they're not as good. But that's not the point. We expect Google to add the Mojo weather software on top of kind of meh hardware. But if you're missing one of 3 cameras, you're failing Google. And this is my problem. So 2 cameras is a miss.
Yeah, I mean, Google had a couple choice words to say about it. On stage, they said verbatim, we think ultra-wide sensors or ultra-wide lenses are fun, but zoom is more important. And then I've listened to another podcast where they did an interview and they talked about how, I think it was The Verge, the Vergecast, where they talked about how most DSLRs have zoom lenses, and that's what we're trying to give people. But most DSLRs are different than a smartphone. A DSLR is purchased by, for the most part, a professional who is trying to do a business, taking pictures of people who are posing for them or taking pictures of street photography, and they're trying to get a specific aesthetic. A random person buying a smartphone is trying to take a picture of what's around them. And for the most part, that's a person, but they're also trying to capture the scene around that person because, hey, we went on vacation and we're in front of, we're at Yellowstone National Park and there's some bison here and there's a massive field with 1,000 bison and my family's in front and I want to capture all of it. And I can't do that with a zoom lens. I can capture a half of it, a quarter of it, or even less. And because they got the digital zoom so big or so good, why even put the 2x zoom if digital zoom is amazing? Why do you need a 2x zoom sensor?
I mean, you're getting an f/2.4 lens that's super slow and a 1 micron pixel array that's 16 megapixels.
It's a horrible sensor.
It's a crap camera, and you're getting incredible performance. And I want to say, this is the next thing we're going to talk about. Wow, this camera, holy crap. But here's the thing, we're going back to what I said earlier, $799, I expect 3 cameras at that price. If you're it's not a matter of one or the other, Google, it's a matter of price.
All 3.
If that phone was $699 with 128 gigs of storage for the big one, then I would be like, okay, maybe 2 cameras, and $599 for the small one. I'd be like, maybe 2 cameras is fine. You're Google, you're paying the tax for the Google experience. That's what you're buying. I get it. And then maybe it would have been the ultra wide and the regular. But no, they went for a telephoto, and then they went for the 2 only for an insane price that's not competitive. And this is exactly the issue, right? I'm like, I'm so frustrated with them. At the same time, the camera is so freaking good. I thought for sure that the iPhone had stolen the throne this year, but now I'm having second thoughts.
Yeah, I mean,
You wrote about this.
I wrote about it. I did a camera comparison between the iPhone 11 Pro and the Pixel 4. And in my review, the title of my review was, Pixel 4 review, reclaiming the throne, because the iPhone 11 Pro beat out the Pixel 3 hands down when it came to camera performance. And people commented on my reviews like, you got this so wrong, the iPhone clearly won, this and that. And my response was, wait till tomorrow, I'm publishing my camera comparison, side-by-side photos with both devices. Google nailed dynamic range.
Oh my God, it's
so good.
So good. If you're a photographer, this is so good.
When compared to the iPhone's pictures are brighter, and people immediately gravitate towards brighter images for the most part. But when you look at those brighter images, it has all the highlights completely blown out, while the Pixel is a slightly darker image, which you can brighten up later if you want to, but it keeps all the highlights and all of their details from blowing out, which is incredible, while also revealing more detail in the shadows. And then the shadows balance,
in this thing are blowing my mind. It's like I feel like I'm using a full frame sensor on a DSLR. Exactly. And that 2 slider adjustment in the camera for the HDR plus. Oh my God, it's dream come true. I do not know how to explain this to you, listeners. This is another revolution forward in terms of computational photography. That and the astronomy mode or whatever it's called.
Astrophotography.
And the night side is better and portraits are slightly better. It's like, it's just so good. It's just so good. And so we're not here to bash Google on this phone, but that's why we're so frustrated. Or I am, at least. I don't know about Nick, but I'm frustrated because like I feel like this should be my phone, my daily driver again, and I might not do that this year. And I'm going to talk about why in a second when we talk about the Face ID and the fingerprint, lack of fingerprint, and the whole issue around that. That's a showstopper for me. But the camera, holy crap, the camera, it's redeeming itself. The more I'm using it, Nick, the more I'm like, oh yeah, oh, bring it to daddy, you know?
So one of the features of the camera that I really enjoy so far, and today I actually just published a camera comparison between the Pixel 4 and last year's Pixel 3, is white balance now is done automatically. They're using their computational photography for white balance, just as they did with night sight. So for those who didn't know, night sight was a series of long exposures that they would stitch together to brighten up the scene. But then for white balance, because it's really hard to nail it when you're doing long exposures, they were using computational photography saying, hey, this is a sky, this is what the white balance should be. This is an object, this is what the white balance should be. And using that information by object recognition to paint in the correct white balance rather than using just the light from the scene. Now they're using that all the time with the standard HDR plus setting whenever you're taking pictures. And the results are incredible, especially when compared to the iPhone, which is usually a little bit warm. Those side-by-side comparisons between the iPhone 11 Pro and the Pixel 4, it's night and day. Like I was taking a picture in my daughter's room and she has a blue carpet on her floor, and it was kind of rough. it was kind of a cloudy day, so the light was a little bit muted and everything. But on the iPhone, the carpet looked gray, just because of how they warm up the picture with their white balance. And the Pixels was a little bit darker than what it should. It took it a little bit further into the blue realm, but the carpet is blue. It's not gray, and the iPhone clearly missed it while the Pixel 4 got it. And things like that. So when it's using that computational photography for the white balance, it just makes it a lot better. It's not just saying, this is what I think it's going to be. It's saying, we're recognizing these objects. This is what the white balance needs to be for these objects, and corrects it.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I feel like it's hard to explain this camera until you start using it. It is, we're talking about, you know how the iPhone 11 kind of blew away the 3XL, but it blew away such a small thing. They were both so close and so good, right? And then the same thing happened again. The 4 is blowing away just a little the iPhone 11, but it's not by much, but it's significant enough that if you are an imaging person, you'll notice. For the average person, I actually think all three of these phones are great. You could use a 3XL still. It's a pretty damn solid phone in terms of imaging. But it's just like, there's definitely some improvements, and it's definitely not about the hardware. We know that, because this hardware is very meh. This is about the software. Meh, and
the fact that the Pixel 3a does such a great job, it shows it's
right.
Definitely
and this
not
is the other
hardware.
Thing about the pricing. We're going to again talk about that at the very end, but it's like $399 for a 3A. Why would you spend $799 again? Why?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, I understand why. I'm just saying, like, you get 90% of that experience. Why would you bother spending that extra, $300 more? No, is it $400 more? $799 to $399 is $400 more for double the price for basically 90% of experience, for 10% less experience. Like, no. Why would you? It's stupid at this point, right? So, I don't know. The camera is just amazing. I will link to your comparison article, and I want people who are paying attention here to go check out Nick's work. It's really good stuff. There's lots of comparisons out there, lots of people taking photos. I've been posting a lot of my photos on Instagram today. I still haven't taken a lot of photos with the phone, like where I feel really proud of showing them off, but there are a few things in there that you can see right now that are gems already for the little bit of time I've actually tried to shoot with it. So
I've snapped over 500 pictures so far. What have you been doing?
Yeah, I've been busy with other stuff, unfortunately. No, I hear you, Nick. I fail. So moving on to the next thing that I think is, for me, the reason I don't think I can make this a daily driver, at least not immediately. and that's why they're both in my Pocket 3XL and 4 right now, 4XL, is that, and this has blown my mind. I did not know this until Daniel Bader told me on the podcast last week, because I hadn't set up my phone yet, because I was still trying to do my unboxing video and I hadn't unboxed the phone yet. He said, oh, you won't be able to use any of your banking apps because they won't even notice that there is a Face ID sensor. They will report that there's no fingerprint sensor and they won't work. And I'm like, how the hell is that possible? Like, Apple made that transition like perfectly, right? You went from a non-Face ID phone with a fingerprint reader to a Face ID phone with the 3D scanner, and all of a sudden, all your apps that needed like some sort of authentication, biosensing authentication, biometric, would work, right? It was seamless. Now, you're going to say they're highly integrated vertically and everything. It's Apple. They pay attention to this stuff. But I cannot believe that Google failed that. So do you want to explain to my audience what's going on and why this matters?
Well, honestly, I think your point of the transition that Apple made versus this transition that Google is trying to make is clearly comes down to markets of scale. Apple may not sell as many iPhones as overall Android phones, but when it comes to, hey, we're going to launch a flagship device, this is going to sell 100 million units versus Google selling a flagship device that's going to sell, I don't know, maybe 10 million units, not even. People notice the difference. So when Apple says we are launching this, everybody gets on board. Google says we're launching this, people are like, who cares?
Right.
And so I think that's the main issue that we're running into right now. Google just doesn't have the market share in order to demand, banking applications to update in time. They will be coming. We've seen some things that, banks are saying, hey, the face unlock, secure face unlock is going to be updated soon. We don't know when. But who knows? I mean, it could be a miscommunication part from Google's standpoint as to, Apple might have given a heads up to a lot of their, banking partners months in advance with APIs and stuff like that, because they knew about it with the previous version of iOS that was announced that these things were coming. But Google really didn't put out feelers saying, hey, this is going to happen. Let's make sure you get updated so that this works right out of the gate.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, just to give you some idea, if you're like just the average person listening or using a phone, I know that none of you are average. You're all super phone fans here. But the point is that, right now, if I want to use my bank apps, even my Tesla app, which doesn't require a password for me to use my car, but does require me a password to change settings and stuff. Right now I use my fingerprint for that. Like, I use my fingerprint to log into my bank accounts or to my PayPal or to, if I want to send Square Cash or Venmo, right? I use my fingerprint for all that. It's way more convenient. This is what makes mobile life. You can be in line at the freaking, wherever it is. In my case, oftentimes in line boarding an airplane, and I can do some banking very quickly, just on the spot. Oh, I forgot to pay this bill. Let's do it now. That kind of stuff, right? Although most of my bills are auto pay. But the point is that now I have to literally type in a password because the app thinks my phone doesn't have any kind of biometric identification. It doesn't see that the system has a 3D Face ID that's secure. It doesn't even register on the app. So it doesn't give me the option for fingerprint login at all because there's no fingerprint reader. So again, for $7.99 Google, why didn't you put in an in-display fingerprint reader as a second solution for this interim time, since you knew that the developers are going to be a little slower than with other platforms, right? AKA the Apple iOS platform, right?
Honestly, though, I do not like in-display fingerprint sensors. If
Neither do I.
Put it on the back because it's a better
it would have been
experience
cheaper.
for the users.
It would be nice to have it without being an indent, like some sort of like little dot you tap, right?
Or under the Google logo.
Under the Google logo, and put the Google logo higher up. Yeah, it would have been great. The point is, they could have done something to hold us over, or they could have worked as Apple did with the developers early on. And they said, whatever, we're going to do what we want to do. And then right now there's like, I think one of the password managers supports it and like a couple of other apps, and that's it. And my
question is, does Google Pay support it?
Yes. Google
Okay,
Pay
'cause
is
I
the
haven't tried Google
flagship
Pay yet.
app that supports this, and I've paid.
That's the only one.
That's the only one on my phone that I can use right now, which is exactly why I can't make this my daily driver. I'm sorry, like I can't. It's just not going to happen. I'm honestly thinking of switching to a OnePlus 7T or this new McLaren OnePlus 7T Pro 5G for T-Mo, since I'm a T-Mo customer. Even though I'm not in 5G markets, I travel enough that hopefully I'll hit some 5G at some point soon. I wouldn't buy a 5G phone if I were you, listeners, but at the same time, if you get one as a review unit, why not, right? So that is a big, big problem.
It is a problem, but I think one thing that needs to be stated is that the Face Unlock actually works really good, and
it's fantastic.
The best experience on an Android device that I've had so far. And I love
it's faster than the iPhone.
Simply love the haptic feedback you get when it unlocks.
Well, the haptics on this phone are top notch. They're even better than the 3XL was.
But you're holding your phone in your hand and you just have it at your side and you pull it up to your face and it gets halfway up your torso and pointed towards your face, and it just like that millisecond of that haptic feedback saying, boom, I'm unlocked. You're like, oh yeah, that's a good feeling.
Yeah, it is so fast. It's faster than the iPhone 11, I think.
Yeah, I haven't compared side by side, but it's incredible. I mean, I don't care if it's slower than the iPhone 11. It's a great experience, and honestly, I think more Android devices should be using secure Face Unlock. I honestly thought I was going to miss the fingerprint sensor for the ability to unlock the phone when I want. Right? You have the option.
That's not a problem. It's not a problem.
I'm going to unlock. I'm not going to unlock. You have the settings options of jumping directly back into the home screen when Face Unlock recognizes you, or keep you on the lock screen.
Yeah.
So you can do whatever you want from that perspective, which it works. I love it. And I think more devices should have it.
I agree. And I'm not wanting to make sure that everybody who's listening understands that I have no issues with Face ID and 3-dimensional scanning of your face as a secure biometric system. It's reliable. It works. I don't have any issue with that. My issue is the fact that I can't use my banking apps in the interim. Like there's this period of time where I can't use this phone.
I'm hoping it's not more than 6 months though, because that's going to be a
deadline. There is a deadline for developers. It's January 20th. However, we know this is never going to happen because Android developers don't give a damn, and they don't have to, right? Do you really think that Bank of America is going to care?
No.
Exactly.
So we're done. Not unless Samsung releases a device that with secure Face Unlock.
Exactly.
I mean, that's
it's
the only
not
thing that's going to move the needle.
Totally. And that's the problem. So, this is issue. This is bothering me so much right now. Anyway, but let's move to the last thing, which is the value issue. I think there's a few little things we can talk about real quick. I'm just going to give like rapid thoughts, and you can maybe give rapid thoughts because we should switch to other topics.
Yep.
But my rapid thoughts are Solia is cool because it senses that you're about to want to unlock the phone and it's ready for you, which helps that really fast face unlock. But it's completely uncool because those gestures are a total gimmick.
Correct.
Okay. We're doing yes and no? All right.
We're on the same page. I mean, honestly, Soli, the demos that we've seen with Soli on just Soli itself are incredible. I just think the technology is not there. Yeah. I don't think they're ready yet to bring it. But from what I've heard, we should be seeing updates to enable more things going forward. So stay tuned. I'm hoping it's not 6 months away, just like last year's Night Sight came, what was it, a month and a half later?
Yeah.
Maybe we're going to get some Soli updates soon.
All right. The next thing was, we talk about performance being bonkers, and another thing that makes performance particularly bonkers is the on-device, like offline. You can be in airplane mode. Google Assistant, voice recognition, and that voice recorder that transcribes things in real time, which you're using right now to do a backup of your own recording for this show, which is incredible.
I am.
All that stuff makes the phone so much more responsive and more like, the computer in Star Trek than ever before, right?
Yeah, I mean, launching Google Assistant and watching it transcribe on the screen as you're talking, and then giving you a response right away, especially if it's an on-device command, like, turn on the flashlight or, change the song, things like that. It makes Google Assistant that much better, because
it's amazing.
The issue with Google Assistant has always been the half a second that you have to wait for it to go to the cloud and back in order to process those commands. And now it's instantaneous on the device whenever it can. So that's incredible.
It's amazing. And then the value proposition, we've kind of touched on it a few times, but this is my big issue, is that I feel that this phone at $799 should have at least 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage, and a third ultra wide camera. I'm okay with everything else, but these are the 3 things that at that price point would appease me and make me not be so angry and mad about this phone. And if they couldn't do that, if they gave us the phone they gave us in terms of hardware with its limitations, and of course a bigger battery, that should have said that. But those 4 things, bigger battery, ultra wide, more RAM, and more storage, more base storage for the base price, if that phone was $599 for the small one, $699 for the big one, I'd be like, okay, maybe I'm willing to look the other way on these issues. But right now, like, who's gonna buy this phone at that price? Wait for the sales.
Yeah. For me, the issue with the value here, yes, you should be getting a lot more for your money at that price point. But for me, the main thing, the detractor, is something that they simply omitted. And that's the free full resolution backups to Google Photos. If you price it out to, say, 3 years is what you got on the Pixel 3, a full resolution backups, saying, let's say you want a terabyte of storage on Google Drive, that would cost you over $350 to $400 over the course of 3 years. That's value that they've detracted by leaving the price the same as what they were last year. So hardware's the same. We're just removing $400 of value from you. And for me, someone who takes an incredible amount of pictures and videos, my family, and going on vacations, things like that, that's the biggest issue, because that was the core part of the Pixel experience. This device is meant to take pictures, and we're going to give you unlimited storage so that you can look at the amazingness of what those pictures are. You can't do that anymore.
You're right. And then related to that, there was like the 6 gigs of RAM is going to be very old in 2 years, right?
Yeah,
I mean, people on this show are not going to keep the phones that long, but still.
No.
Right. So, I mean, I still think that there's definitely a value proposition misunderstanding here.
Yes.
and
if it was $100 more, I don't think we would be griping as much. Or $100 less, not more.
Exactly, less. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And if it had included that storage, it just feels like going backwards in every way. And I just don't understand like where Google's coming from on this. Anyway, this is basically our Pixel 4 and 4 XL review, folks. And now we have other topics. So yeah, any final quick thoughts?
Final thoughts on the Pixel 4. I still recommend it if photography is the main thing that you're going to be using it for.
Or updates, or if you want 0-day updates on everything. Yeah,
but there's a couple other devices that have been delivering that or close to it. So
true.
There's more options on that front. For me, it's if you're a photographer and you want a tool that will serve you well in that sphere, this is the phone for you, especially if you're on Android.
Indeed, that night sight astronomy, whatever it's called,
Astro Wizardry.
It's amazing, and the zoom is incredible. For 2x zoom, like optical zoom, the results of the super zoom are incredible. All right, so elephant in the room is obviously OnePlus here, right? That's one of the big elephants in the room. And surprise, surprise, there's news from OnePlus today. I mentioned it at the very beginning of the show. OnePlus 7T Pro McLaren edition with 5G is coming to T-Mobile. That's the news for today. That kind of blew me away, especially after they were so adamant last week? Yeah, that there was not going to be a OnePlus 7T Pro in the US and that it would never, and none of them would have 5G. Are they messing with us? Do you think
I think they are.
OnePlus is just effing with us?
You know the regular PR spiel,
Yes,
right? We have nothing to say. We know this device is not coming when they make a slight tweak to it and give it a different model number in the software, but it's the same device coming off of the production line. I don't know. At this point, though, I think this is great for consumers. I mean,
Yes.
Yes, the back and forth of it's coming, it's not coming, who knows what.
We don't know the price and availability though, so just be aware that, right now it's $100 more for the McLaren edition, £100 or whatever, €100 more
100 euros more
for the McLaren edition than
which
the
usually translates into
70.
about $120 more US.
I mean, also I would even say it translates just into 100 because US is generally cheaper overall, right?
Yeah. But so while this is great news, honestly, just go buy the 7T. It's just as good.
The 7T is incredible.
And
this is if you want like the Rolls Royce. Like if you want...
Yeah, if you have money to spend.
Like I'm honestly thinking that if Eric at OnePlus, and if you're listening, Eric, please humor me here. If he sends me a OnePlus 7T Pro McLaren edition with 5G review unit that I can use on T-Mobile since I'm a T-Mobile customer, I might switch to that as my daily for the first time, move away from Pixel, because I get everything I want there, everything I want. And I can get the Gcam port in a month or two when it happens, Well,
and I think they already have the Gcam port.
Yeah, no, but the current Gcam port, not the old Gcam port.
The Pixel 4
Pixel
one.
4 Gcam port.
Yeah, they probably got that on XDA already. Go check it out.
That's true. XDA has everything. Anyway, so there you go.
Yeah, and honestly, I think this is going to be a great device for T-Mobile. I hate to see exclusives, though. That's my only thing.
Well, that's the thing with the carriers in the US, and OnePlus is playing that game now. They started playing that game when they crippled the OnePlus 6T by giving it a single SIM tray and locking it. And well, who knows what else they did to it? I can't remember, but you know what I'm saying. They
added the Google feed to it, which was a positive.
Oh yeah, that
thing.
was a good thing. Yeah,
exactly.
That's always one of my gripes in my reviews.
To tie in this though, back to the Pixel 4, we didn't mention it. The 4 is available on all 4 major US carriers.
That is a big deal.
Which will make it the best-selling Pixel smartphone to date, even though everyone's trashing on the phone. It's going to be available in stores, and people are just going to wander in, and there's going to be a couple million that will just buy it because it's on the retail display.
Instead of 5 people buying it now, it's going to be 20 people. Yay.
But that's a 4x increase, right?
It's totally legit. It's totally legit. Okay. Next phone, because really these are news items. Next phone is the LG G8x dual screen. It's coming to the US on AT&T on November 1st. So that's really all I have to say. I mean, we saw that phone at IFA, and it's finally happening with a carrier. Of course, AT&T is going to trash it by putting bloatware out the kazoo on it and have that stupid 5G Evolution logo indicator on when you're on 4G LTE Plus.
I'm excited for this phone, though.
I hate them for that. I hate them for that.
This phone, I got to play with it at IFA for a little bit, and it is a 2-screen phone with a secondary screen for the case that folds up. It feels like, I don't know, like the Nintendo DS that doesn't feel like crap.
So is it like the Axon M but done right?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's kind of it. I don't know. You could compare it to the new Microsoft phone that was announced a couple weeks ago, with the two displays, except this one you can actually take one display off if you don't want to carry it around.
Yeah, if you want to be lighter, you can remove it, which is really cool.
But the phone comes with the case with the display, so it comes together. You don't have to, not like I think it was, what was the other one that they launched earlier this year? The V50, where you can buy it as an add-on. This comes with it, which is a good thing because I don't think anybody bought the add-on. Absolutely
correct. So look forward to that. I should have some content on my YouTube channel about this very soon. I can't say more than that, but that's basically, keep an eye out for that. You know that my G8 review was on Geekspin. You should go check it out. The G8X is just a G8 slightly on steroids, and now has a dual screen option through a case that's highly integrated with it, and basically gives you like a similar to Galaxy Fold experience, but without actually a folding display, right? So
one that won't break on you.
Exactly. Should be interesting. The other big news of this past week, I'm kind of going in reverse chronological order. We're talking about the most recent news, like today's news was the OnePlus, and yesterday's news was the G8X. And then 2 to 3 days ago, Moto, CNET got an invite from Moto for an event in LA on November 30th. And it looked like the way Engadget was reporting about this, it looked like Engadget hadn't received the invite yet. Now, they might by now. All I know is that I did a bit of poking around. I contacted Moto in-house PR and Moto agency PR, and I know that other bloggers and journalists and YouTubers also reached out, and a lot of us are not invited, is all I'm going to say. And I'm not saying that because I'm, trying to be petty about it. I am disappointed. I will be honest. Moto should have invited me, should have invited Nick, should have invited other people. But I feel like it's something big, obviously, that they specifically chose a smaller venue with a smaller number of guests for. And it's very, very clear it's going to be that Razr rebirth as a folding phone. And that they want to focus on lifestyle and potentially YouTubers, influencers, more than tech media for this. Is that your take too?
Yeah, I mean, from what we've seen so far, it looks, I would say 95% sure that's what it's going to be. If anyone's seen the leaks, this is going to be the Razr phone, or the rebirth of the Razr phone as a foldable display device. So rather than going the Samsung route of having a foldable display that becomes
a tablet,
larger, a tablet, you get a foldable display that becomes smaller into a clamshell device, which honestly I am thrilled about. I'm
super excited about this thing. I think it's going to be really cool.
I don't care if this, I haven't been excited about foldable devices. I've played with the Galaxy Fold. I was within the vicinity of the Mate X.
I've played with both, yeah.
And I like the design of the Mate X a little bit more, just because aesthetically it looks
sleeker.
Different.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's going to hold up in day-to-day use. We know the Fold is extremely fragile, so just be warned, these devices can break. But this Razr with the foldable display on the inside and a small, tiny display on the outside, and a front-facing camera to take selfies, things like that, it brings us back to an era of when phones
were small.
Phones lived in your pocket. Like, they didn't live in your hand or on your desk or anything like that. They lived in your pocket because that you carried it with you and you brought it out when you needed it and you put it back. Nowadays, they're just out all the time. This is going to bring us back to when phones are small and they belong away and not be the center of your life anymore. And that sounds crazy for somebody who reviews phones for a living. Put your phone away and don't use it. But I'm excited about that.
Yeah, no, I'm excited too. Very briefly, I'm just going to leave the link in the show notes because this is kind of old now. It's actually predates the last podcast. There's also been a leak on the Moto G8. We just got the Moto G7 like 3 or 4 months ago. I reviewed it for Geekspin. Check it out. But now we have a G8 coming. It's actually a G8 Plus leak. So I'll put that as an Engadget link. I don't really have much to say, but I want to kind of piggyback on your Huawei Mate X comment by saying that the phone is finally launching with a caveat.
Time.
It's launching on November 15th. It's launching in China only for now. It's launching with a Kirin 980, which is last year's chip. And there's already rumors, or at least maybe not even rumors. Huawei seems to indicate they're going to have a slightly revised version of that Mate X in the spring with the Kirin 990. It could maybe be the Mate X2 at that point, for all we know, with even improved display folding tech. But it's happening. It's real. We might have more now than within a few weeks. We might have more than one folding phone out there.
Well, I think there's two,
right?
Technically, right? There's two. But that
no,
other one
that would be the Mate X, and then the Razr, and then the Fold would be the three.
Well, there's that one that was announced at CES.
There's the Royal. The Royal doesn't count because it's China only, and it's
you can still buy it. This is going to be China only. So
yeah, but we know it's going to come eventually globally, and hopefully the whole brouhaha with the Huawei ban will be resolved by then, because it's a nightmare. By the way, as a quick update, for those of you who followed for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've been talking about it. I finally got GMS on the Honor 9X Pro, and I will mention and explain how I did it because all the workarounds are gone, but I found a workaround, another one, and I will explain in my Android Police article when it's finally published. I'm still working on it. It's a lot of work, that article. So that's it.
Be sure to share the details with me, because I got the device.
I will do it offline. So the Mate X is coming finally. A couple of more items before we wrap up. There's been a lot of issues. Have you been following these issues about the in-display fingerprint sensor on the Samsung S10 and Note 10? The ultrasonic one from Qualcomm apparently is borked if you use a screensaver. No, sorry, a screen protector.
Yeah, so for those who didn't follow the news, someone discovered that they could unlock somebody's phone using any fingerprint, even though it should be locked to an individual's fingerprint. And the ultrasonic sensor is supposed to be more secure than the other in-screen sensors that OnePlus and other manufacturers are using.
Yeah, Huawei.
The resolution of it's supposed to be like 4 to 5 times higher for it, in order to pick up. But with a screen protector on it, all of a sudden that goes out the window. And it's not really clear as to if this happens when you're trying to set the fingerprint if you do it with this screen protector on it, or if this happens afterwards and it messes up with the optics.
Yeah, it's so weird, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
But there's a little bit of fallout here with it too. Like, as you were saying with the Pixel 4 not being able to use secure authentication with banking applications are now pulling back support for the Samsung devices, saying these devices are no longer compatible because of this issue. Wow. Because it's essentially unsecure. So now all of Samsung's Galaxy 10 devices are losing authentication abilities with banking applications.
Oh, Jesus, what a nightmare.
So it's the reverse. They had it and now they're losing it because it's not secure anymore.
And I bet you the banks are going to be way faster at removing that stuff than adding it to the Pixel 4.
Oh, of course they are. Oh. Well, no, so here's the thing. If they're updating their application or, going in and changing which devices are compatible, I mean, that's something that you simply do through the Google Play Store. And, the next time the app update rolls out, that happens. But if they're doing that anyways, they're like, I guess we can maybe add face authentication to the application since we're updating it anyways, right? Who knows?
Don't count on it.
Wishful
it's
thinking.
Banks. We're talking about banks. They're behind. You're an HTC guy. I was an HTC girl. And HTC is still close to my heart. I actually published a tweet of photos of the Pixel 4 that I took at the event last week. And I captioned it, check out the new HTC Desire Pixel.
Hey, it was made by the HTC team.
I know, that's what I'm saying. You get it. Nope, very few people got the joke. I don't understand why. And it looks like a Desire. I don't think people even remember what the Desires look like. Anyway, but what is your take on this Exodus Bitcoin, whatever, crypto phone that they've been talking about? And now there's a new one, the One S. What is this?
There's a new cheap version of the phone. So for those who don't know, HTC made a version of the HTC U11 Plus from a year ago, or a year and a half ago.
It's a while ago.
A high-end phone with specific cryptocurrency capabilities built in so that you could do cryptocurrency exchanges and stuff like that through the device. And they even made it so that you could buy the phone through HTC with Bitcoin to make it tie in completely. But the new Exodus One is a cheaper version. It's not an $800 device. I think this is a €350 device. Low-end specs all the way around. But this will actually allow you to authenticate Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency transactions directly on the device, not needing any internet connections or anything like that. The software does everything. They recommend making sure your phone is plugged in while you're doing this, because I imagine it's going to take a while and it's going to use that processor as much as it can. And then it also has the capability of holding an entire Bitcoin ledger on a micro SD card, which I think the way it works right now, I think they need over, I think it was over 200 gigabytes of storage. Wow. So you can't do it on the device because the device only has, I think, 64 gigabytes of storage, but it needs for the whole entire Bitcoin ledger, it can hold that on a micro SD card, which is pretty good. So if you're into cryptocurrency, definitely check it out. They're saying all of these features will come to the HTC Exodus, the flagship phone, which has a lot better specs, but of course it could be 3 to 5 months before that happens.
Well, there you have it from the horse's mouth, Mr. HTC himself.
Yeah. It's been a while since I've talked about HTC, or there hasn't been anything good to talk about.
I threw it in there because I was like, Nick's going to be happy. Nick, do you want to tell people on the internets, the listeners, the audience, where they can find you on the internets?
On the internets, well, there's a lot of places. If you want to follow me personally, I am at Nick M. Gray on Instagram, Twitter, used to be Facebook. No, not Facebook. I took that away. No one cares about Facebook anymore. But you can find all of my work about Android devices and my reviews on Phandroid.com and also YouTube.com/Phandroid for all the video content as well.
There you go, folks. So don't forget to follow Nick on Twitter and listen and watch the videos that Nick makes and the YouTube channel. And of course, Phandroid. Check it out. You know where to find me on the internet. I'm at ThankGirl. That's TNKGRL, like the comic book ThankGirl without the vowels. If you go to Twitter, that's where at ThankGirl exists. And also, if you go to Instagram, that's where at ThankGirl exists. Both are the same person. That's me. And you can get some, commentary, sometimes a little crazy commentary, but also some photos of phones and photos taken with phones. But also, I have a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/MiriamJoire. That's my full name spelled out without a space. If you want to know how to spell it, just go to my Twitter and you'll see the name there. So just put it in the youtube.com URL. And it's a lot of videos that kind of complement this show. So when we talk about the Pixel 4, 4 XL, you can watch a video hands-on and unboxing about the phones in my channel. And just like Nick has a lot of great videos that go along with Phandroid. So check out the YouTube channel, subscribe, tell your friend, click the little notification icon, comment in the comments, all that good stuff. Please spread the word. And of course, the podcast is at mobiletechpodcast.com. You should subscribe if you just happen to land on here. I'm also on all the major platforms: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Cast, Overcast, TuneIn Radio, Spotify, Stitcher, everywhere. So search for Mobile Tech Podcasts. And if you're old school and you like RSS, there's an RSS feed at mobiletechpodcast.com. If you want to comment on the podcast, you can't in the actual web, so just do it on Twitter. Just ping me on Twitter and let's talk about what your thoughts are about whatever show we're talking about. And then I want to thank our sponsor, Audible.com. Audible.com is the platform for audiobooks. They're pretty awesome. If you maybe are driving a delivery vehicle all day or something and you can't physically read a book for whatever reason, they're a great place to go to get your bookworm satisfied. And I like the fact that a lot of the books are read by the authors, that they have an incredibly great selection, and that they've been, helping the podcast for a while now. So there's a special deal. If you go in the show notes below, you'll see there's a link where if you click through, you'll get 30 days for free. That's not that unusual. But the cool thing is that if you buy a book or more, you can keep them, which is nice. And then the other thing is that you don't have to stay at the end, basically, but it supports the podcast. So you're going to help out the podcast no matter what. If you're not already an Audible customer, I suggest you go and check it out. The link is audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. It's in the show description as well. So please click through and support the show. We really appreciate it. And Nick, thanks so much for being on the show again.
My pleasure.
Yes, we'll have you on some other time, probably when some HTC news happens. You never know, right?
Yeah, that's never going to happen.
Oh, come on.
Hey, the HTC does have a new CEO, so we might see something different coming out from them.
You never know. In any case, stay tuned for next week. We'll have another show. And until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with ThankGirl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.